trickling in, but I know security was very busy. So I appreciate everybody here taking time out of their busy mornings. I'm Alex Hoogveen-Rudder, private sector specialist with the International Solar Alliance, and I'm coordinating the session with Vivek Mittal from the African Infrastructure Development Association. So Dr. Mathur, unfortunately, is delayed, but I just want to say personally, one of the reasons I joined International Solar Alliance was because I was so excited about the potential and opportunities for South-South collaboration and South-South learnings. I think there's so many fantastic projects going on in India and, of course, across the African continent. And we're here today to discuss how we can learn from each other and accelerate these opportunities. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Engineer Abubakar Ali Dapshima, Director of Renewable Energy, who's representing His Excellency the Minister of Power for Nigeria. So I'd like to invite you to the stage to deliver opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Please, I want to align to the existing protocol. I am representing the Honorable Minister. My name is Engineer Abubakar Ali Dapshima. I am the Director of Renewable and Rural Power Access in the Federal Ministry of Power. The Honorable Minister, Chief Adebayo Adelabu, he is on another very important assignment with our President outside these premises. So he asked me to represent him. Please, so thank you very much. I just want to make a keynote address on behalf of the Honorable Minister. Nigeria has a population of over 200 million. And right now, as I am talking to you now, the power sector has been, privatized, which the transmission is owned by government, while the distribution and the generation is by private sector. And presently, we don't have even 1 megawatt direct connected to the grid. The reason is we need a lot of investment and we need private sector participation. And for that to happen, we must get a strong and vibrant policy and regulatory framework, which will allow private sectors to participate. And at the same time, the grid is not robust to accommodate solar. So the Transmission Company of Nigeria and the World Bank, they have commissioned a study to conduct the grid reliability studies so that to determine how much solar the grid can actually accommodate. And during the last energy transition working group, which I represented the Nigerian power sector in that team. And after our deliberations and also during the last ISA assembly, after discussion with ISA and all the relevant stakeholders concerned, also the Indian power grid, we now want to leverage on Indian experience, which is they have over 350 megawatts connected to the grid and is done by private investment. So we now invited ISA to come to Nigeria to have, discussions with our power sector, especially Transmission Company of Nigeria, NAC, the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trader, and the regulator, and we, the policymakers in the country, to actually discuss and also learn from the Indian experience what are those frameworks that they establish or they have done that private sector can invest so much into the Indian grid system, which second week of December, they are coming to Nigeria. We are going to sit down and discuss with them so that we know what are we supposed to do as a nation to actually, get private investment to develop large scale to the grid, that the grid can observe without, disturbance. As I'm talking to you now, we have just commissioned 10 megawatts that is distributed in embedded distribution through the Kaduna DISCO, through the National Sovereign Investment Authority, which was commissioned by the last administration. And right now, under my department, we have the 10 megawatt wind farm in Katsina. So we hybridized that wind farm by 10 megawatts solar. The project is ongoing now. I believe in the next 3 to 4 months, that project will be completed, and we are going to evacuate 10 megawatts from the solar through 33 kV line, that is through the distribution network. It's not going directly to the 132 or 330 to the grid. So this is the situation of the Nigerian power sector, and this very important meeting that we are having is a leeway that, you know, we can now leverage on, and also, you know, see what actually frameworks we can put so that we can attract more private investment into the power sector, because government alone cannot do it. It is through very robust tariff regulatory framework and also policies that will really encourage and, you know, support private investment, that they can invest and they can comfortably also repatriate their investment. And there has to be some incentives that will be put on ground so that it can make their operation easier. So I want to, from here, stop and thank ISA and thank the AFIDA for arranging this particular forum here in COP28 for us to discuss and hear from the experts, which the panelists are going to be here to hear from them, and now have our contacts across so that we can collaborate and work as a country with all the development partners that are concerned. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for those phenomenal remarks. Obviously, we're here to learn from each other. I thought it was especially interesting, your comment about distribution-connected solar. That's maybe something India can look at adopting as well. But of course, India is a leader in transmission-connected solar, large-scale solar parks. And so to moderate the session and take it away from here, I'm going to hand off to my good friend Vivek Mittal, CEO of the Africa Infrastructure Development Association. So please, Vivek, take it away.
And apologies, but you know, it's a sign of resilience when both the chair and the moderator are missing, and the organizer are missing, that the panel starts on time and gets going. Without further ado, so I run Africa Infrastructure Development Association, and we have a very, very interesting group of okay. We have a very interesting group of developers, investors, financiers, and advisors in our mix. What they do, they're very busy, they're profitable, they have lots and lots of deal flow, but it is not enough. They raise more capital than typically they wish to deploy in a particular year. On the other hand, we have lots of developers looking for capital who struggle to get to them. So the essence of what we do is to try and do things that bring together people, to convene people. We run courses, we run an accelerator where we allow for people to come together and discuss what's holding back investment. The essence of, if you want scale and quality, we need to get speed right. And with that, the point of this South-South cooperation between India and Africa is to see what India has done very well over the last 10 years. Is there a way to bring that onto the continent? The overall theme of this discussion is going to be how do we take things that are difficult, when the whole market is difficult and putting deals together is difficult, how do we take it? What is the inflection point? What needs to happen to take the difficult to easy? And that is, with that, may I invite, we have a long number of people who have accepted the invitation to come across. However, you know, I'm 15 minutes late. People will trickle in. So on that account, Eluma, please come and join us over here. Andrew Johnston, CEO of Climate Fund, over here. Eluma Obi-Baku, Director of Project Finance at Africa Finance Corporation. My very good old friend, Rajiv Ranjan Mishra, CEO of Apraava Energy, but I always knew you as CLP, CEO of CLP of ages. And you know, I've lost my hair, you've become gray. You used to have black hair. Yeah, yeah. Wale Shonibara, Director, African Development Bank. And who are we missing? We could get, Mr. R.K. Tyagi from, please, sir, I've never met you before, but please join us. And we have room for one more. Vezi, are you here? Please, Vezi, come along. Stephen Deva from SAP, are you here? Please come forward if you are. Okay, so now we're going to try and run this as a roundtable. We have lots of interesting folks in the audience as well, and we'll get a participation. So, starting from the right, once you've done your emails and SMSs, you massive multitasker, you. Andrew, would you start us off? So Andrew has many hats. Amongst them, so he's founder of one of the most successful climate fund managers. He's founder of successful climate fund manager, one of the largest and most active climate funds out there. Please tell us what you do. And amongst his many hats, he's a co-founder of AFIDA as well. And I have this job because of him. And I do it because he's our chairman as well. But please start us. What do you do? And give us some thoughts about mobilizing scale, speed, and quality in Africa.
Sure. Do you want me to dive into the content or just
explain a little bit about yourself?
Oh, okay, cool. So good morning, everybody. Andrew Johnstone. Climate Fund Managers is a dedicated fund manager. It does what it says on the tin. We raise money, we deploy it into the development stage and construction stage of projects. It's infrastructure focused, so we build real assets, and we do it in South and Southeast Asia, including India, obviously, Africa, and Latin America. The business has been around for the last 6 years or so, has $2 billion under management, and we do a lot of project development, very active in Nigeria, and we operate across both the energy sector, the water sector, and moving into hydrogen. So we do a lot of development activity. We try to do what the moderator sought to set the scene with, which is to take lessons learned in other parts of the world and bring them to Africa and vice versa. And certainly what we've seen is the evolution of the power sector, certainly renewable energy, going from utility scale down to rooftop, down to group captive models, going into solar park models, is far more vibrant, far more aggressive in India than anywhere else in the world. And there are lots of points of difference as to why it works there and why it's more difficult to do in Africa, but we'll explore that a little bit further during this panel. Yeah. So great to be here, and great to see you hard at work.
Thank you very much. Earning my wages, if you will. Eluma, please introduce AFC and your work, your wonderful work.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Eluma Obibuaku, and I'm with the Africa Finance Corporation, which is essentially a DFI focused in Africa. And within that group, I lead the power sector work, wherein we deploy capital in the form of equity, debt, various debt instruments, and just like Andrew, we also invest money in project development because this is one of the areas, frankly, where there's a significant weakness, and therefore we try to start from there and work our way up. One of the challenges, and I don't want to get too much into the detail of it, but one of the challenges, of course, that we'll explore on the continent is that of the off-taker. And the challenge that you have with the off-taker works its way back to how, when, and whether the private sector can participate as actively as it would like to.
So you really touched on the key point that we'll go on. Rajiv, please introduce your new company, CLP, what you've done in India all these years.
Am I audible? Yes, hi. So my name is Rajiv Mishra. I head a company called Aprava Energy in India. And I'm also wearing my second badge, which is co-chair the Power Committee of the Confederation of Indian Industry, the industry body. So we started in India, internationally owned company. We started in India in 2001, so coming up to a quarter century. And started life purely as an IPP of thermal and gas-fired generation, but moving on with the times were amongst the first ones to first get into renewable generation, wind at the large scale in the early years, and more recently into solar, into transmission, and indeed smart metering rollout. So in summary, we invest and own and operate assets right across the electricity value chain now, which does not generate carbon dioxide, except for a historically owned coal-fired power plant, which we still own. I will get on in the second phase, Vivek, if that's all right, with how we as foreign investors have found India and how some of the things that have resulted in.
And correct, so in addition to China Light and Power, you have CLP.
So now we are owned half by CLP, 50% and half by CDPQ, a Canadian pension fund manager.
Okay. So pedigreed investors, and you've been there since about the
Pretty
first
much
investment was
pretty much since the private sector, the country opened for private sector investment in the electricity sector.
in the late
So
90s.
in the mid-1990s.
Mid-1990s.
So we commissioned our first gas-fired power plant in December 1998. So we are the longest surviving foreign investor.
Surviving. So that's a Freudian slip there.
Who knows?
And in terms of solar and wind, how many megawatts now?
Well, so we, depends on how you count, including the ones which we are building is about 1.6 gigawatt of solar, wind, and 750 megawatts as I speak of solar. The rate at which the bids are going, it might increase by another 250 by the time COP finishes. But
By
we
the
shall
time we
see.
finish this panel.
But on a serious note, we are aiming to add a gigawatt equivalent of non-carbon generation assets in the country every year.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what success looks like. That's where we want to be in an African context. Wale, you have super busy, and I had you captive hostage on a long car journey yesterday. We talked about lots of things. Please reflect on please explain what you do in the shortest possible time, and what you'd like to get out of this panel.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Wale Shonibare. I'm Director, Energy Financial Solutions, Policy and Regulation at the African Development Bank. For those who do not know the bank, we're the premier development finance institution on the continent. And over the past 20 years, the bank has invested over $20 billion in the energy sector. Within my department, I have two divisions. One is more upstream work where we do policy, regulation, statistics, enabling environment to facilitate private sector investment. And then my other department, Financial Solutions, is where our investment officers sit and we structure across various instruments, debt, equity, guarantees, capital market solutions, and we have financed renewables and non-renewable energy across the board, wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, across the continent. So very happy to be on the panel. We see projects right across the value chain. We've seen the problems, and we're also part of the solutions. One of the key documents we published, the Electricity Regulatory Index for Africa, where we benchmark the regulatory environments across all of the African countries against international best practice. It's a key reference point for investors coming into the continent. So we're also a key partner for foreign investors as well as local investors who are embarking on investments into the energy sector.
Thank you very much. Next up, Mr. Tyagi, welcome to this meeting. You're at Power Grid International, Power Grid Corporation of India Limited, PGCIL. Please introduce your work, what PGCIL does, and the role you played in the solar parks boom in India.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is R.K. Tyagi. I'm Director Operation in Power Grid. Power Grid is a transmission company operating in India. We are one of the major player in forming one nation, one grid in India, one frequency. In India, as you know that we have more than 476,000 circuit kilometer, out of which Power Grid is owning about 176,000 circuit kilometer, about 512,000 MVA capacity. We have over 275 substations. Our availability has been more than 99.85%. We have played a major role in renewable RE integration, be it Rajasthan, Gujarat, or any part of the country. We are also connected with the neighboring countries, with Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and there are further talks with Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Maldives, and interconnections with Oman and UAE. There are discussions. Our operations are there in 23 international countries. We are going to set up the 4 substations and transmission line in Kenya. Then we are in talk with Tanzania, 5 lines and 5 substations. And Nigeria, as my friend told, we are also under discussion with these countries. With Africa 50, we have made a joint venture. So we already have our interest in Africa. With AFIDA, we can move further and we can jointly work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, so one of your counterparts in Africa, Stephen Deaver from SAP, Southern African Power Pool. Please introduce yourself, your work, and the amazingly innovative ventures you're getting into right now.
Thank you, Vivek, and good morning, colleagues. I trust this is on. Okay. My name is Steve Diwa. I head the Southern African Power Pool. This is the power pool that looks after countries in the Southern African Development Community. Currently, we are covering 12 countries, of which 9 of them are connected electrically at transmission level. We are making efforts to get the remaining 3 to be interconnected. One of them is already being interconnected as we speak. So we look at coordination of both planning, operations, environmental aspects, as well as trading, but particularly on the trading part. We have now established a competitive market where we have a month ahead, week ahead, day ahead, and intraday market. And though originally we started off as the national utilities running this market, we now have introduced private players, independent power producers and traders to be part of that market. We're seeing a lot of interest from particularly developers of renewable energy. And we foresee a lot of renewable energy being traded on that market to the extent that we believe it might be even critical to set up a separate portfolio just for renewable energy. That's what we foresee. We expect that projects will be developed in the different countries, be able to trade on this regional platform and hence sell their energy throughout the Southern African region. Okay. We are also realizing that transmission is critical in terms of ensuring that the trading is successful. And for that reason, we're also trying to develop a facility that finances transmission projects that are at regional level. Thank you.
So that financing facility is very important. We'll come back to that. Next up, and finally, Wesi, please introduce yourself and the work that you're doing at Africa GreenCo, including, please, advertise your great agreements that you're signing over here. One every day.
Thanks, Vivek, and thanks for inviting me to this panel. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Wesi Gondwe. I'm Executive Director at Africa GreenCo, responsible for business development. GreenCo is a new energy trader and aggregator of renewable energy in the region. We first set up in Zambia, and now we are in 3 other countries in the SADC region, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. And GreenCo's raison d'etre, we were birthed out of the need to respond to the question, how can we stimulate and encourage investment in new generation capacity in the region, given that the old standing model, the single buyer model, with the national utilities in these markets standing there as the sole buyers of new capacity on the market. And as we know, that model reaches its ceiling and has reached its ceiling in most of these countries, given the fiscal space that the national treasuries that back these utilities, are facing. And so our primary objective is to offer route to market for renewable private developers to invest in projects and buy that power on a long-term basis and sell it on to commercial and industrial customers in those markets. But GreenCo model, the model and how we de-risk our PPAs and how we de-risk the investment is very much hinged on the Southern African Power Pool as a venue that serves as an alternative market to de-risk bilateral risk and default. And so we were one of the first, in fact, we were the first trader to be admitted membership to the SAP in 2021. And that was in a process of long engagement with the SAP. And I think it's an endorsement of how the SAP sees the future development of energy and particularly renewable energy in the region. We've yesterday just signed our first PPA in Zambia on a project that is designed and built as a merchant risk or SAP-facing project. And we're rolling out projects and scaling up our pipeline in various countries. So we don't invest in the actual physical generating assets or facilities, but what we do, given the capital that our investors have put in GreenCo, do then crowd in and facilitate private investment in those IPPs that have been stranded for a while. Our investors, very quickly, Vivek, are Infraco Africa, that's part of the Pitch Group, the Danish government's IFU, and the European Union's EDFI, Impact Investment Facility.
Thank you.
So that's where we are as GreenCo today.
And you signed your agreement with Illuta Power, which is backed by Buffalo Energy. Buffalo Energy, in turn, is owned by Serengeti and Camco, which are all members of FIDA as well.
Exactly.
And if I may add an interesting anecdote, so in 2016, early 2016, when I first met Anna Haduka, she had a PowerPoint and on Africa GreenCo. And that PowerPoint was entirely based on the business model of Power Trading Corporation of India. So that was the genesis of this, of what we've what you have achieved over the last few years. We've also got Marco Serena from PIDG, but Marco, I'm going to bring you in a bit later. So let's get started over here. So, and capital, expertise, experience. We have tons of that on this panel over here. Andrew and Iluma, may I ask if both of you to briefly introduce how deals come together in Africa? And solar, wind, hydro. Of course, both your institutions have had a record sprint in Djibouti, which is a record-breaking project. Talk about that in contrast to the norm of how projects come together in Africa. Very briefly, please.
You want to start?
Yes, happy to do so. So the private financing of the energy sector is building on what's gone before. The very first asset type that was financed within a PPP model in Africa was probably toll roads back in the late 1990s. That was then followed and originated in South Africa. There was a very vibrant toll road sector, followed then by accommodation projects, including prisons, followed by water assets, water distribution, and then ultimately, around about end of 2010, 2012 or so, renewable energy started manifesting. And it was a new model. It was a new model that up until that point, most of the revenue lines had been determined by throughput and patronage assets. So what then happens, the private sector started getting heads around actually financing projects with long-term offtakes. And PPAs and defined revenue lines became a feature of our financing model, which has made life easier, provided you had a credit-worthy offtaker, but also made it more difficult because there were very few of those type of entities around. But it did make the development of projects both simpler in terms of their project finance architecture, but much more difficult because there were fewer and fewer counterparties to actually transact with. And since then, the model has evolved, trying to find a workable and scalable model between those two revenue configurations. Throughput and patronage, which is what Steve and Africa GreenCo are doing, which is basically a trading model underpinned by long-term revenue, but filled in the spaces by the market. And what used to happen with baseload, which is long-term offtakes to match the asset life. Solar parks are a derivative within that. And so I think we keep on testing these models as to what can we actually finance, and the key is to provide financing which is of a long enough duration to ensure that the payback of that money is affordable to the user. If you look at assets, of my final point, another good equivalent is the mining sector. Mining doesn't invest on offtakes. You know, they go and build the commodity, and then they sell the commodity based on the belief that the commodity is worth something. So hydrogen has got that flavor to it. But mines are only financed on 7 years. You can't finance social assets on 7 years. So these are the issues that we need to think about as a developer, and it all goes down to the risk tolerance, really, of the capital you've got. So it's an ongoing journey.
So it's a low risk, the way I say it is that the actual margin equity investors and debt providers have is of the order of 2 to 4%. And that means one can get 150 to 125 projects wrong. And it can take you several years to recover. If a project goes wrong, if an investment is lost, it can take you several years to recover that 1 out of 25 projects that goes wrong.
So I'm going to hand over the mic to you. It depends on how you make your money. If you make your money by holding that asset whole of life until the residual worth of the asset is zero, so you hold it for 20 years, the equipment is fully utilized, and you've harvested all the cash flows that come out of it, then you're determined at that point. Or you could trade the asset for some capital value midway through that period. What is evolving in the market is actually the interpretation and monetization of what the capital value is. So assets are now worth more trading than necessarily holding it for long term.
Excellent.
And this is a maturity aspect of the market, to trade the assets themselves in addition to the electrons.
The churning of assets and capital, the velocity of capital, if you will. Okay. Iluma, do you want to build on that and talk about, how long does it take to get a project financing together in Africa? And where is the replicability? Where are you seeing repetition and replication?
Okay, so first of all, I'll do that, and forgive me if I'm slightly long-winded. The purpose, or our purpose as an institution, is to address the shortage of power in Africa. To address the shortage of power in Africa means that new greenfield assets have to come in. It doesn't mean that Andrew and I can trade assets between ourselves and he makes money. We actually have to create brand new assets, first off. We certainly are not afraid of making money. We are very interested in that. But the purpose, the bigger purpose, is to ultimately ensure that people get this energy. And so to sort of get back to key aspects of Vivek's point, we've actually had in the past year, this year, we've actually acquired, alongside other partners, 1,000 megawatts of wind operating in South Africa, Senegal, and Egypt combined. We also, earlier in the year, had acquired elements of solar within the Bemban corridor, which again does exactly what he has just mentioned in terms of creating value for the initial investors. But in coming into that, we have two things in mind. The residual value and the remaining value of that asset has to be significant and has to put you in a position to actually expand the assets. So for us, there's no value in buying this phone from him if we can't increase it, right? So it's a little more than just the velocity of the capital itself, but also in doing so, creating new assets and going on and on and on. I am tempted to get back to one point which is critical for our continent, And that is that in order for us to do what I've mentioned, you still have to make sure that the off-takers are put in a healthy position, that the grade in terms of what government needs to do is actually put in a position where that can happen. And we need to look for instances where you can actually have truly large scale. So on the continent, you will see in places like Bemban, the Bemban solar, there's about 2.1 gig of solar. And basically what they did was to set up the basic structure. So there's a huge piece of land, so you're not dealing with any land-related issues. There's transmission infrastructure coming in, so you're not worrying about transmission-related issues, etc. And there's even down to the details of ways to clean the panel, and then the appropriate regulatory framework. So you have a plug-and-play scenario, and very quickly you can build a lot of power. A lot of our countries don't have fairly small grids. I mean, in many places you have countries that have 1.6 gig, and that's it for the whole country. So there's not too much scope in those countries to do the large-scale stuff that we need to focus on. However, regionally, you can think about that, and there are opportunities to do it in certain countries, and I think we need to go towards something like that as a way to make sure, A, that you build up significant power, and that they come in at a cheap enough rate that they can make an impact. But the private sector will come only when the government actually provides the environment that enables for it to operate.
Thank you very much, and very insightful comments. Wale, may I bring you in next? Well, there'll be more clapping later on. We're going to get to a crescendo of how projects should come to, how solar parks should come. Wale, tell us about the time it takes, how projects are getting financed, what is missing. We talked yesterday about the large-scale projects in Egypt. Morocco has also implemented some large-scale, what might approximate as solar parks or renewable energy parks. Tell us your experience at AFTB about these and why they haven't scaled so much in the rest of the country.
My experience is that in Africa, we take far too long to structure projects. On average, it takes you maybe 7 years to do an IPP from start to finish. A lot of our countries are doing demonstration projects. So you have a lot of concessional financing from DFIs, blended finance, and they don't reflect market financing realities. In most countries, apart from South Africa, the commercial banks are not involved. All the deals are being done by DFIs. The tariffs are very, very low because we have affordability issues in our countries. You try and keep the tariff low, but unfortunately, you're financing in hard currency over the long term. And we've seen the currency depreciation in our countries. And over time, it makes those projects not sustainable. If you're lending long-term hard currency in Nigeria today, every 5 years, the local currency value of your loan doubles or triples. And you can't always pass that on to the end consumer. You'll hear statistics that, projects hardly ever fail in Africa. That's why more investment should come in. It hardly ever fails because you put all your belts and braces and you over-structure, you over-engineer the project. So if they were to fail, I mean, that would be, ridiculous because you spend so long. But because we over-engineer projects, it means that you can't scale them. All those resources, all the concessional financing and blended finance that you put in are not that plentiful. There's a limited supply of those. And many of our countries have reached their debt sustainability limits. They cannot provide the guarantees that the international investors are looking for. So in many countries, you probably only ever do 1 or 2 projects. You cannot scale because those countries don't have the fiscal space to be able to take on and do those guarantees. So we need a different approach where we have to encourage more local currency financing where it's possible. And you and I were on a panel thinking through how we can do that. And secondly, we need to move away from the single buyer model because most of our utilities are financially challenged on the continent. Maybe only 1 or 2 utilities are actually viable on the continent. So what we do in the bank, we've put a lot of money into regional interconnections. You know, East Africa Power Pool, West Africa Power Pool. The Southern Africa Power Pool is the most developed, but by the end of this year, the West Africa Power Pool will be fully connected. And we have to encourage more regional trade. I've been trying to do the first IPP grid connected in Chad for the past 7 years, right? In that time, we've had 15 ministers, and the president was, assassinated, basically. And each time, you have to start more or less all over again. So, and the grid, I mean, how much renewable can you anchor if the grid is only 100 megawatts? You know, so if you use your rule of thumb of 20%, that's very limited. Even 34 megawatt needs you to put in batteries in order to stabilize the grid. So these are some of the practical problems. So if you want to build a solar park, in West Africa, we've been looking at this for a while, you have to interconnect it with other countries because many of those countries there do not have strong enough grids to be able to anchor. You need base load to anchor intermittent renewables. And if you don't have enough base load, then you either build more or you interconnect so that you can distribute it. And what the Egyptians have done extremely well, the Egyptians have significant amount of base load, 99% almost gas-based, fossil-based, but they're now introducing more renewables. So you can have Benban in Egypt. And what the government did so well, as Eluma said, they provided all the infrastructure, built all the roads, transmission interconnections, so basically plug and play. Over 50 developers being invited in an auction, and they were able to do it very efficiently, very quickly. All the documents were standardized. So we need to try and replicate more of that on the continent. But these, project by project approach will not work. We need large scale programs so that the private sector can mobilize and invest, like we've seen in South Africa, and several rounds of bidding in order for the tariff to come down. Most countries are trying to go to the lowest tariff straight away without building the track record that attracts that confidence to bid low. That's not right, and then you end up not doing anything. I've got 14 solars on hold in Nigeria that we can't take anywhere. Everybody is looking for cheaper tariff. Just start, and then round after round, as you build confidence, you're going to get cheaper tariffs. Let me stop there. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. It's a long list, but if I can just sort of summarize and tell me if I've missed anything. It is demand in addition to creditworthiness plus transmission. These are 3 things that, if you were to summarize what you said, and the dollarization. So the solution is so I'm talking about, so I'm talking about the challenges. The four challenges are dollarization, the lack of large-scale demand, transmission access, and the fact that we do things which really result in once in a while. And there's a long list behind that. Can we switch over to India for a second? And Rajiv, may I start with you to talk about, we met in about, I think 2019, was it? Probably around that time.
Maybe, yeah.
And you representing pedigreed capital from outside India, went through all the ups and downs of the Indian economy. Tell us how projects were put together very briefly before solar parks came in, and then what are the challenges that you faced in convincing your masters and your capital providers to give you money to engage in the solar parks?
So thanks, Vivek. How much time do you have? Sorry.
I'm asking to summarize 20 years in 2 minutes.
Try and keep it short. So I think, some of the points that have been mentioned seems that it's not rocket science. Africa or some parts of Africa are already doing that. Now, obviously, in some areas, India has an advantage, which is firstly scale and size. So that gives you a base. But I'll take a step back. If I look back over the last 25 years, the key to attracting foreign investment is identifying the risks. Now, they might be different from country to country. And indeed, in the same country, they might vary over a period of time. Now, if we focus on risk rather than what the tariff is, then I think that's where the secret sauce lies. India has done it pretty well, not always seamlessly and necessarily as fast as many of us would have wanted. But over a period of time, I think they have gotten it right. Speaking in the third person, we have gotten it right. But I work for the private sector, so they have gotten it right. Now, looking back, what were the risks? Let me just start with the renewable portions era rather than go all the way back. In the renewable era, the big risk, 2006 December is when we signed a PPA for our first wind project in India. You had two, aside from other things, what were the elements that were stopping investment? First was the tariffs were high, and second was that it was intermittent. Distribution companies always want the cheapest tariff, and therefore the biggest fear was who will buy it and who will pay for it. So the regulatory answer to that risk was what was called RPOs. So each distribution entity was initially set a renewables purchase obligation. By the way, it started at 2%. Now at 2%, even if you are mixing 4 cents per kilowatt hour with 20 cents a kilowatt hour, the impact of that 2% is relatively low. In fact, almost in the early stages, negligible. So that led to, in the first few years, about 1 gigawatt of wind projects, typically in 50 megawatt sizes, with fixed tariff, with feed-in tariffs, and the main regulatory measure being the RPO, that being the main handle. Now, if we moved on, once a certain amount of generation capacity was built in, then came the issue which a lot of our African friends seem to talk about. Distribution companies were not profitable. And therefore, how do you, whether it's private sector investors from India or international, the question is, why should we invest when we are not sure about getting it back? And government guarantees are not an answer. At best, they are a Band-Aid. No matter which country you go to, no one seems to have enough or will ever have enough to keep guaranteeing everything. Therefore, so that was the first. Now, the policy response to that, which I think was quite revolutionary looking back, was that the central government formed specific entities, starting with SECI, the so-called Solar Energy Corporation of India Limited. That became an intermediary. So it was the government entity which would sign PSAs, back-to-back PPAs with the distribution company. We took the risk of the central government-owned entity, which obviously had the highest possible credit rating. They made a small 5 or 7 paisa, 1 US cent, 0.1 US cent per every unit of electricity sold. In turn, therefore, they became more and more profitable, and thereby, the most recent response to that has been that SECI, if India has to have 15 gigawatt of renewables added every quarter, SECI alone was not able to do it, so the government has expanded the list of central government-owned entities which are conducting those bids and putting together those bids. So, what I suppose...
Massive de-risking.
Yeah, massive oftentimes, and I have worked for private sector, in fact, international companies, non-Indian companies, pretty much all my life. And I have worked in a few other countries as well, although never in Africa. Mostly in East Asia. I think the key is really, those of us from the so-called global south, it takes us a little bit of time to get to this, the understanding that the key is risk. Key is not how much tariff, what is the IRR, what is the rate of interest, and whether World Bank or ADB or all these wonderful institutions whose names we see here are actually, so in each country it might vary. And the key is each country or each market has to identify what are the risks, key risks, and take care of those risks. Once you do that, the private sector will come in.
So may I fine-tune that? Because we discussed that in Vale's panel yesterday. We talk about risk mitigation generally. But risk mitigation has two elements. One is risk allocation.
Right.
So when we take out a hedge, when we take out a fixed price PPA, when we take out a fixed price EPC, we are allocating that risk to somebody and we're paying them for
Correct.
it.
Correct.
There is risk elimination, which is a lot more beautiful. If we finance in local currency using local capital, that just eliminates the FX risk. It's gone.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And then now you might have a higher return, lower return, but it is a much lower risk. So that distinction between risk elimination and risk allocation is key over here.
Absolutely, Vivek.
Yeah?
And you know,
you're looking at me sideways, and is this new to you?
you know, we all.
I don't think the risk disappears.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
that's happening in that instance is that if you've got a local institution like a Nigerian pension fund administrator who could make a hard asset investment or a local currency investment, and he chooses to do a local currency investment which may de-risk the project, it is actually impacting on his own balance sheet because he's now absorbing that local currency because he's got a matching liability that he has to
But not
pay
in dollars.
pension at some stage.
Yeah, but not in dollars.
It's true.
But the dollars is gone. The dollar
true.
risk is gone.
But from an investment perspective, over the long term, he sort of mitigated his own FX risk by holding hard currency assets. But so I think I think that I'm only looking at it because I don't think the risk actually disappears. I think the risk gets disseminated and spread. I think there is a clear difference between cash and risk goes onto the balance sheet. And this picks up Wally's point, is about the effectiveness of insurance instruments, of risk allocation within blended finance architectures, which I think are important to mobilize the market. I agree they're difficult to scale because they are bespoke. But I think they all play a very different, interesting role of how do you take that risk into other areas. It's not all just cash.
Okay. So we talked about creditworthy off-takers. We talked about de-risking. Mr. Tyagi, would you share your thoughts? When did BGCIL, being the country's main transmission company, when did renewable energy and solar parks enter into your radar? And what were the challenges that you first faced, and how were they solved? What are the solutions you implemented for them?
Thank you. In India, as the demand for renewable or requirement for renewable started, Power Grid, especially in the state of Gujarat and Rajasthan, we started developing green energy corridors. And green energy corridors are not simply these are transmission system, because there are challenges in integration of renewable. As per survey of MNRE, our Government of India department, there are potential areas. Major is Rajasthan, Gujarat, then Andhra, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu and other states. So once you have to connect renewable energy sources, you have to consider that there will be variability, there will be intermittency, there will be effect of voltage fluctuations, frequency fluctuations, because rotating masses are not there. So you have to take care and develop all the facilities with development of transmission system. So Rajasthan and Gujarat, where this renewable energies are being established, they were not connected with the thermal or hydro systems. So as a developer, as a planner, we consider that these need to be connected to the existing system. Like in Gujarat, we started connecting them to from Bhuj to Mudra. So Mudra-Bhuj connection was conceived. Then from Bhuj to Banaskantha also it was connected. Then Banaskantha, Chittorgarh, Bikaner. Then on northern part of side, we have Moga. So Moga is connected to many hydro plants. So Moga was to be connected with this. So like that, for variability or for this frequency oscillations, we thought that it will be a requirement of the system when we are developing the green energy corridor. Then second is voltage fluctuations, because the MVR flow will change like anything. Like in daytime when generation is high, the voltage will be low. In the evening or morning or night when power flow is less, so there will be the voltage, this reactive power will be more. So you need to have the dynamic compensation in the form of STATCOMs. So STATCOMs were planned. Almost 20 numbers STATCOMs have been established so far in Indian Power Grid. And moreover, when we have been planning this Indian Power Grid, we have connections right from north to south, east to west. Earlier we had 400 kV backbone, but in early 2010, where we thought that it will not be sufficient. So we required overlaying 765 kV network, starting from Delhi to Agra, Gwalior, Wardha, almost all the part of the country, southern part, this Trivandrum, Pugalur, Hyderabad, Aurangabad, Pune, in almost all parts of the country, 765 kV network has been built, and which is serving as a very strong this grid, where integration of renewable is very much easy. You will be surprised that in last 10 years, we have established almost solar power almost 30 times.
Okay.
So today what we have, it is developed almost in last 10 years, and 30 times has been developed.
Okay. So, Mr. Tyagi, sorry, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but I've just been informed that our panel has been curtailed by 15 minutes. So we need to start. This is improvisation. So we need to start getting to wrap up over here.
I'll take two more minutes
No,
if you
no,
kindly
we are
allow.
actually. I would really like to stop you because there are a few other comments I want to bring in.
Okay.
And because this is focused on Africa. Stephen and Vezi, do you have very quick comments, 30 seconds each, to add to the problems on transmission and market operation? Very quick ones.
Okay, but I just want to comment. There's been a discussion around risk. And I think we need to be aware when we come to Africa that besides talking about some of the real risks that particularly financiers talk about, there's also perceived risk. And a lot of the time is wasted and projects are delayed while pursuing perceived risk.
So the perception of risk will evolve. That's the entire conference on its own.
That's right. So I don't want us to debate it.
Please.
But let's be aware it's also on the table.
Okay.
The second thing I want also to comment on is being aware that historically projects, particular generation projects, were developed by utilities, backed by the governments. But I think let's be aware of what's happening as the power sector is opening up. Government have started up opening generation first. In other words, now you can go and invest in generation literally in almost every country. One of the things that's happening as well is opening up on the load side. And from the sub end, we now allow even large industrial areas, we allow large mines to also become members on the market. So that, because the market has got two sides to it, suppliers and consumers. And we want all players to be on board. And we believe that makes the market more efficient and it becomes the key driver to investments in the sector.
Vezi, a comment from you?
Thank you. No, I think Greenco's journey has been, I think, a very interesting one because it's been more than just about setting up a business, a trading business. It's been about addressing regulatory and structural impediments to the operationalization of, private sector-led, projects in these markets. And so one of the big risks that, investors do see in the African context is the regulatory framework. The inadequacies of it to properly and adequately and rationally allocate risks in a project to where it rightfully belongs. And so in doing this and in structuring our third-party grid access agreements in the various countries, in structuring our PPAs. That has been, I think, the single most important, I think, to date contribution that Greenco gives, and it's creating a template, not just the initiation of a business, but a template that the regulators, the utilities, and ultimately the lawmakers can take a leaf or two from to standardize market structures that will see these things come to happen.
So a SECI type forming on its way to being formed.
Exactly.
There are a number of themes I would have liked to discuss in the next 10-15 minutes, but we don't have that, unfortunately. So I'm going to go to closing remarks. We have two other panelists here with us. Curtis Lockhart from Charter Cities Institute. They are developing cities, and one of the issues was whether cities can act as anchors, new, modern, well-serving cities. We have cities around education, around telecoms, around industrial activity coming together across Africa, and they are doing that work. We have Marcus Arena from PIDG over here. Are there any final comments on how do we take this forward? This concept of large-scale, replicable, low-risk, risk-mitigated solar parks. How do we take that forward in Africa? Any final comments? I'm going to start with Andrew.
So I'm just very excited about what this panel is evidencing, which is close collaboration between India and Africa. These markets are thank you. So I'd say I'm very excited about the close collaboration between Africa and India. These markets are evolving very swiftly. Expectations are developing swiftly. And as we learn these lessons, to be able to compare them and leverage off it, I think is key. So this is actually one of the better panels I've actually sat on because of its potential. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
So two quick observations. I actually yesterday read a little bit about what's going on in India, and there is a significant amount of variation. And some of it you mentioned in terms of being able to create credit worthiness, even where in other parts of the renewable sector you don't have that. That's what needs to come out, maybe not to every country in Africa, but to certain countries so that people can actually pick the kernel of the lesson. That needs to come out. The second point that is obvious to people who are in the say the solar or even the wind business, but the foreign currency issue that Wale rightly pointed to is really talking about capex on the first day. We also finance gas-fired companies and things like that, and they have a large continuing foreign currency obligation in terms of fuel, which is not here. So there are some natural hedges, if you will, that you have just because of the technology itself. And I think Africa needs to take advantage of that.
Thank you very much. Rajiv, super fast.
Yeah, I won't add too much. Firstly, I want to be presumptuous enough to understand that India can teach Africa, so to speak. We all have to learn from each other. But there are several areas where risks that India has faced seem to be similar to many of our African friends. And we'll be obviously delighted to share our experiences. In terms of the perception of risk, that is also equally important. And
we've gone through that in India.
And we have gone through that in India. It's not for nothing that my hair turned white. So very happy to share that.
And Wale, there's a mic on the other side.
No, it's not working. Is it working? The biggest lesson in my mind that Africa can learn from India is that we need more local developers who are using local currency to finance their projects. So
that's
the biggest lesson. Right now, there are too many. It's great. We love foreign developers, but we have to develop African developers who finance their projects in local currency, because that's what's sustainable going forward. Everything else is just, interim.
Excellent. On that note, I'm going to say thank you very much, and please, we are well past our curtail time, so let's just move out of here quickly. I think there's a signing coming through. There are. Why don't you hand out?
Yes. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Why don't we just do one last photo? Thank you, Vivek, for organizing this panel, and all our incredible panelists for their time.